What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fann of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com, covering your Kansas City Chiefs. And today I am joined by my good friend Michael D'Arcy of KC Sports Report to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs' 17-10 victory over the Los Angeles Chargers yesterday on Sunday. And Michael, while it was an ugly win for the Kansas City Chiefs, one that moved them to 4-0, there were other things in that game that became a bigger deal than the actual result of the game. Mainly talking about the Rashee Rice injury, and we'll definitely get to that because that's the biggest story and something we're watching, especially since we've gotten a couple updates on it since you or I have made a video talking about it. But let's just start with the Chargers game. We want to recap that real quick and talk about some of the good and bad that we saw from that game. So Chiefs win 17-10. Offense still looks out of sorts. I'll just kind of let you begin, Michael, because I want to see where you start with this. Like, what is your initial thoughts coming out of that game? I know I typically say that, but it's just I want to talk about so many things, but I feel like some are more significant than others. So why don't you go ahead and start and just tell me what you're feeling after digesting this game for the past 24 hours?
Listen, there's some positives and there's some negatives. I think the negatives outweigh the positives. First and foremost, I think that it's not really talked about enough that maybe one of the reasons that the Chiefs only scored 17 points is because they went into this game thinking that Rashee Rice was going to be a big part of the game plan. And when he gets knocked out in the first quarter, that kind of leaves your offense scrambling to find an answer to that problem. And so I didn't expect them to, come out after that injury and just light the world on fire. I was not expecting that. But, I think that the Rashee Rice injury, we're going to talk about it later in this video. That's a big deal. It's a massive deal for this team. It could hinder the team's, chance at three-peating. But getting to some positives that I saw from this offense, Josh, Kareem Hunt looked explosive. I mean, I don't want to say that he looked like 2018 Kareem Hunt, but man, that guy looked good. And listen, I know that it was one game, one sample size, but Kareem Hunt running the football is very different than Isaiah Pacheco running the football. And you could kind of just see it in the way that he was able to spin off defenders, break tackles. I mean, at one point, they could not stop Kareem Hunt. And I think that is a great thing for this offense moving forward. We saw Travis Kelce finally break out of his shell, having a big game against the Chargers, which what's new? And then we saw Xavier Worthy catch that touchdown over the top, doing what he does best in exploiting defenses. I think that was actually the longest throw of Patrick Mahomes' career. And so to see that click after that Rice injury, I think that's big for Worthy moving forward because he's going to be the go-to guy, at least for the next couple of weeks. And so it's very interesting to see, how the offense rebounds after losing such a big part of it in Rice.
Yeah. So Rashee Rice, massive deal, and I see why you kind of mentioned that already. It's hard not to talk about it because to literally add insult to injury, it was Patrick Mahomes who hurt him by stupidly diving into his knee. And I understand Patrick Mahomes did not intend to hurt Rashee Rice, but I think a lot of us are especially upset because Patrick Mahomes shouldn't be involving himself in any sort of contact to begin with. Because he's also putting himself at risk when he does that. And now
really
he takes
quickly,
out. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that I was thinking about last night, Josh, we were a crazy circumstance away from talking about how Patrick Mahomes tweaked his neck, hitting Rashee Rice in the leg, and we're done. Without Rashee Rice, we have a shot. Without Patrick Mahomes, we might not be a playoff team.
We'll see. And even with the Rashee Rice injury, I'm kind of like leaning on the side of if they don't make a move, like assuming he's out for the season. We'll talk about that a little bit later since there's been some updates. But assuming he's out for the season, I think you're done. And when I say done, I mean like you cannot win a Super Bowl with this offense because I think on paper it's worse than last year. And I know that might be a hot take to some, but it's just I don't think that's sustainable to lose your wide receiver one, your wide receiver two, your running back one, and still think that this operation is going to get you that three-peat. It's just extremely tough, and it's another year of just putting this entire offensive load on Travis Kelce. It's like no matter what they do, Michael, we seem to end up in the same scenario every single year where Travis Kelce is like a one-man show. And I love Travis Kelce, and he did have a bounce-back game. against the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm scared for what this means going forward. And it seems like everything Brett Veach did to rebuild the wide receiver room was basically erased in the first 4 weeks of the NFL season for the Kansas City Chiefs. And yeah, my thoughts are still just racing because the Rashee Rice injury is extremely upsetting. Again, assuming he's out for the year, I think that drastically changes the trajectory of this team.
Well, yeah, Josh. We were talking about how when we lost Hollywood Brown, it sucked, but they could figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah.
Without Rashee Rice, there might not be a solution to that problem because do you think that Xavier Worthy is going to step up like Rice did last year? I think that's a long shot. Travis Kelce's 34 years old, turning 35. You can't expect him to keep carrying this offense on his back. And listen, how confident are you in Juju Smith-Schuster and Sky Moore, who's an absolute garbage can? They just don't have the necessary pieces.
Yeah, I was going to get to that next. Let's just get all the negatives from this game out of the way because I think that's kind of where we're wanting to go. So it's hard to put a lot of this on Brett Veach because it's just generally difficult when your wide receiver 1 and 2 and your running back 1 all get hurt in the first 4 weeks of the season. That's just tough for any team. That's devastating to 90% of NFL teams. But here's what I will say. I seem to always get pushback from a lot of Chiefs fans when I say, why not bring in another guy to get Sky Moore off this roster? Why are we just settling for McCole Hardman making this team? Why not go out and get another veteran receiver? A lot of us clamored for multiple veteran receivers, and a guy that immediately comes to mind for me is Zay Jones, who was in this building and had over 1,000 yards receiving over the past 2 seasons combined. That's a guy that if you had him on this team, you still feel okay. Like, yeah, it sucks that he would become your wide receiver 1 / wide receiver 2 with Xavier Worthy being a rookie, but it would have been manageable. I feel like now we're in a position. You saw it yesterday, Michael. There was a play, 3rd down. They target Sky Moore, hits him in the hands, and he drops it. And I'm telling you right now, when Sky Moore is getting 3rd down targets in crucial moments of the game, that is a sign that things are going wrong. And I've always gotten pushback from fans saying like, oh, Josh, why do you care about wide receiver 6? Like Sky Moore is wide receiver 6. He's never going to see the field. Saying that a guy is never going to see the field is a lazy and inaccurate excuse that I constantly hear as justification for players being on this team. Because time and time again, we see these guys on the field, McCole Hardman, Sky Moore, and they never seem to do anything positive, or their entire season seems to be a net negative for this team. And yesterday was just another example. Wide receiver 5 and 6 matter for this team, especially after you watched what happened last year on this team when they were just shifting guys around, trying to see if they could get any answers. Wide receiver 5 and 6 matters, and it seems like the Chiefs just went, whatever for those positions, and now it's coming back to bite you in the ass because Sky Moore is seeing the field.
Well, and Josh, we felt pretty good about this wide receiver room before the injuries. If Juju Smith-Schuster's your wide receiver 4, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
He can't be your wide receiver 2, and that's what he is right now.
Yeah, and like the top of the wide receiver depth chart looked fine, and that's why I say it's hard to lay too much blame at the feet of Brett Veach because I think the wide receiver room at the beginning of the season looked pretty damn good. But I'm just saying, like, these bottom of the roster moves that people always seem to just brush off as not a big deal, they matter. They really do matter. If there's a guy on your 53-man roster, he should be playable, and Sky Moore is unplayable.
Yeah, and listen, did you see that thing on Twitter about Brett Veach in the press box?
Yes.
Slamming his fist on the table when Sky Moore dropped that 3rd down conversion. I think that the sentiment that we share about Sky Moore is something that the front office also feels, but they just couldn't admit defeat. I think that this is a situation where we're going to see them admit defeat. I think they have to go out and get somebody else because if they don't, their season's probably over.
Yeah, and I still think they'll make the playoffs. I still think they win the division. But as far as winning a Super Bowl, I just don't know if it's sustainable with this offense, with the amount of injuries that you've had. And I know there's some speculation that Hollywood could be back by the playoffs or Pacheco could be back for the end of the regular season. I don't know, man. I wouldn't be banking on that. And those guys are going to be super rusty when they come back, at least Hollywood, I feel like, because Hollywood didn't even play it down in this offense in the regular season. So that's just a tough situation. But yeah, the thing with Brett Veach, slamming his fist down about Sky Moore, like, good. I'm glad to hear that Brett Veach is getting mad. That feels like a situation where Brett Veach just tried really hard to justify Sky Moore being on this team, and Sky Moore has just failed him in every single way. And I'm glad that Brett Veach can acknowledge that it's probably a failed draft pick, but now it's time to act on it and do something about it. Maybe bring someone else in, even if it's at the expense of Sky Moore's roster spot.
Well, and Josh, that's what I'm saying. Like, at this point, like, I don't care that he was a second-round draft pick. Cut him. Like, he's just not going to play. You could give that spot to Nico Remigio or Justin Ross, and he's a better, fit at that position than Sky Moore. So I don't know what we're doing, why we're messing around right now. Cut Sky Moore. That was the decision, plain and simple, last year. I don't know why they even waited. Like, I think that Sky Moore has proven that he is just no longer, a fit in Kansas City. He was never a fit in Kansas City, but they just have to, cut the loss now instead of just letting this keep dragging and dragging because it's gone on too long.
Yeah, no, it certainly has. And I just think you could benefit by getting rid of him altogether and giving somebody else a shot, because through 3 years now, he's given you nothing. And I mean nothing. And it was funny because Andy Reid had a quote today where he said he's given good snaps for us. And someone posted a picture of his stat line where he's literally recorded 0 catches this season. Like, what good snaps, Andy? Where are they? And I know Andy Reid it's coach speak, but yeah, I would rather give someone else a shot, maybe even on the practice squad, if this is what we're going to trot out there.
Well, and I've heard people in the broadcast yesterday, I think it was Jim Nantz, was like, oh, they're getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire back. Whoop-de-doo. Like, CEH is not going to transform this offense. He's just as bad as Sky Moore. Like, I don't know what we're doing thinking that these players that have never produced are going to be the remedy for this offense when everybody else got hurt. Like, there's a reason why they don't play in the first place. It's because when they do play, they suck. So you have to go out and you're going to get somebody else, because Sky Moore and CEH are not the solution to this problem.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And we'll get back to that wide receiver conversation in a minute, but I want to talk about the rest of this game real quick. So Patrick Mahomes obviously hasn't played super well, but the offense, the supporting cast hasn't helped him all that much either. I thought the offensive line looked meh yesterday. Carson Steele, obviously, another fumble, another turnover, multiple turnovers for the Chiefs offense yesterday. And then just the bad interception by Patrick Mahomes. This is really uncharacteristic football from him. And we talked about that in the past video that we just did, where we said that he doesn't look like himself. And it seems like this seems to be a common funk that happens every year in the first 6 to 8 games, but it's really bad this year. These are Patrick Mahomes' worst stats through the first 4 games of any season since he's been the starter. He's sailing passes way above guys' heads that are wide open. I mean, the pass that was intended for Travis Kelce that got picked off, Kelce was open, and he still just overthrew him by about 10 feet. It was bad, Michael. I don't know what's going on.
He just airmailed him. Like, I don't know what's going on with Mahomes either. Listen, I don't think that he doesn't have chemistry with the weapons, because he clearly does, but something is not right. Now, I will say, I'm not going to freak out about Patrick Mahomes, because he's going to figure it out at some point. Like, he just does that. He's Patrick Mahomes. But listen, you're 4-0 right now, and your quarterback is not playing his best football. So I think there is some encouraging signs about that. But these are very uncharacteristic mistakes that Patrick Mahomes is making. Like, we don't see him overthrow guys. We don't see him miss Travis Kelce like that. And so from that standpoint, yeah, there might be something to worry about, because he just looks rattled and completely out of sync. Maybe that has something to do with the offensive line being, kind of garbage. But I do think that he's going to have to improve, because right now, with the current wide receiver room and Travis Kelce starting to get back into, being the old Travis Kelce that he was, you don't have the margin for error because of all these injuries that you might have had a couple weeks ago. And so the pressure for him to perform and be perfect, it's a lot higher now.
Yeah, it's kind of like last year, where you have to grind out these games. You have to grind out wins, and you can't make a bunch of mistakes on offense, because it could end up being extremely costly. Again, we talked about this last week. Yeah, the defense is great, and we'll talk about the defense because they're an overwhelming positive from this game. But even when your defense is so good, I mean, you had to put up points to win games. And there were games last year, like the Philadelphia Eagles game, I remember, or after the bye week, I'm pretty sure it was. And everyone was talking about Andy Reid off the bye. This offense is going to get figured out. And they took a 10-point lead in the halftime, came back out in the second half, didn't score a single point for the rest of the game, and eventually lost because the Eagles' offense was pretty good last year. And what happens when you go up against a team like the Philadelphia Eagles that have all that talent on offense? Your defense is eventually going to allow some sort of explosive play at some point that gives them the lead, and your offense has to respond. And yes, the Chiefs are 4-0, but it feels like a very weird 4-0 because it feels like something where if this doesn't get figured out, these wins are going to start turning into losses because the Chiefs have had some close calls this season, and I'm not trying to diminish this 4-0 because I think they played some very good teams to begin the year, but they've all been close games. And from that standpoint, I'm worried because the offense is just losing more and more key pieces as we get further along.
Yeah, no, I share those same concerns because listen, we just got done with week 4 and the Chiefs are out 3 of their offensive starters. I mean, what is this team going to look like in week 8, in week 12, in week 16? Our bye week is much earlier on this year. What is this team's health status going to be 10 weeks from now? And so, yes, this is a big concern. And I think that, listen, before the season started, my only concern was injuries. Could the Chiefs avoid injuries? And right now, that injury bug is biting them pretty damn hard. And so they're going to have to figure out some way to continue to rally around, this defense, kind of ride the defense like they did last year. But I really question if this team is going to have enough healthy guys come week 15 of the regular season. Like, God forbid Chris Jones gets hurt or Trent McDuffie gets hurt, and then this defense takes a big step back. So, I mean, right now it kind of feels like we're hanging on by a thread, even though we're 4-0.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. But there are some positives. So I'll start with one. Xavier Worthy. He was kind of quiet the past couple weeks. Explodes for another 74 yards, I think it was, and a touchdown. And he was open a lot more times than that. Mahomes just missed him. And when I say missed him, I mean like he didn't see him open, but he was wide open. I went back and saw some of the clips. Xavier Worthy is getting open more than he is being targeted. But he had the big bomb, and that was great to see because that was pretty soon after Rashee Rice went down. You're like, well, shoot, we need someone to step up. And then Xavier Worthy was immediately there. Now, it's very unfair to put these expectations on him, and we're going to have to speed up his progression. And it's very unfair, just like it was for Rashee Rice last year, but he's going to have to become a guy. But there was a play later in the game, one that I find more valuable as far as evaluating Xavier Worthy than the deep touchdown he had. And it was the slant to close out the game, Michael, before the Chiefs could knee it out. And what I really noticed about that is on that play, that was a play that I can 100% guarantee was originally drawn up for Rashee Rice. That was Rashee Rice's play right there. It was a slant over the middle where, you run a quick underneath route, defenders too far away for them to make contact before they hit the first down. And Rashee Rice has made that play so many times, but you're able to just slide in Xavier Worthy there because he has the speed and the athleticism to replicate Rashee Rice in the slot. But you're definitely going to have to grab another wide receiver to complement that if Rashee Rice is out for the year. Again, we'll get to that later. But that was a positive I saw. Another positive, you already mentioned it, Michael, Kareem Hunt. He looked great. He averaged over 5 yards per carry in his debut with the Kansas City Chiefs. And this is with only a week and a half of practice and being signed off the street. And I still think he has quite a bit of burst, probably more than people thought he still had. He was still generating a lot of yards after contact. There was a play they ran for him that was straight out of the 2018 playbook where they flipped it to him, a hesitation handoff, and he nearly got in the end zone with it. He looks great, Michael, and I think he's a nice boost to this running game.
This is going to be an incredibly hot take. And honestly, maybe I'm just, fanboying out a little bit. I get substantially more excited watching Kareem Hunt run the football than Isaiah Pacheco running the football. And maybe that's a crazy take, but I just feel like Kareem Hunt has that possibility of turning nothing into something huge. And Pacheco is fun to watch, but I feel like there is just more predictability.
He goes down at first contact quite a bit.
Yeah. But I just think that Kareem Hunt, like, he could get hit, he could do a spin move and jump 4 yards. Like, he is so much more fun to watch run the football. Every single time he got a carry in this game, I was glued to my television. I wanted to see if Kareem Hunt could break off a big run. And you saw it a couple times where he was able to get past that first level of the defense, and he's a tough guy to bring down. And so I think that Kareem Hunt is really showing that he does have something left. He might not be 2018 Kareem Hunt, but listen, at this point in the Chiefs season, they just need some production. And I thought that for a guy that came off the street a week and a half ago, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think they're going to have to continue featuring him in the receiving game more and more as the Chiefs receivers keep getting hit by the injury bug, because Kareem Hunt was the best receiving running back they had in a really long time when he was here the first time around, and I still think he has a lot of that ability. So I'd like to see that going forward. Another positive, Michael, the defense. Defense looks fantastic. Even without having Mike Dana in this game, Felix was unleashed a little bit. And he actually had a handful of pressures in 17 pass rushing snaps. And it was encouraging to see. However, it's kind of hard for me to judge him because I thought he did well in the little amount of playing time he had. I also noticed when the snap counts came out, though, that he didn't even crack half the snaps. And it's like, well, if Mike Dana's out and you're still not getting even more than half the snaps when there's really nobody else, then what are you for this team? I don't know if I should view his performance as a positive or a negative.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I thought Felix was an interesting prospect coming into this season, but I also thought that he had the most to prove because first-round draft pick a couple years ago, George Karlaftis has had substantially more success, and I think that we're kind of starting to see that the Felix pick was a reach, and it was to appease some of the Kansas State fans in the Kansas City area, a year in which the draft was in Kansas City. So I understand why Clark Hunt went that route, but I don't think that he was the right player to pick. I think that as time goes on, we'll see that, he's not as big of a bust as Sky Moore, but he's not going to be playing, the snaps that George Karlaftis does or Charles Omenihu does, or even Mike Dana when he gets back. And so it's important that, he can find some role in this defensive line, even if he's just getting you a couple pressures a game, maybe a couple sacks. I think that my expectation level for him is so low that if he can just do that, I'll be happy.
Yeah, he at least showed more than he had in the first few weeks, which is good, but we'll just have to monitor it going forward. But I mean, the defense as a whole has to be a positive. Chris Jones is putting together a defensive player of the year caliber season. He had the highest pass rush win rate in week 4 out of all defensive linemen, regardless of alignment. And the run defense also, too, has been fantastic. J.K. Dobbins, we have raved about how good he's been for the Los Angeles Chargers after the Chiefs should have signed him, but the Chiefs shut him down. The Chiefs are holding running backs, Michael, to a combined 2.9 yards per carry this year. I mean, we've never, even when our defense was really good last year, the run defense was not this elite. This run defense is elite.
No, they've been fantastic, and that's always been the big, knock on the Chiefs defense. They can't stop the run. They can stop the run this year. And Josh, listen, we gave a lot of shit to Mike Pennell and Derek Nottie and Tershawn Wharton, but right now they're doing their job. They might not generate a lot of pass rush.
Yeah, he's looked great.
But they're doing their job.
Yeah. No, Tershawn Wharton has been another guy that has impressed me a lot. I mean, he's played his ass off, and yeah, there's not too many bad things to say about this defense. This Chiefs team is definitely going to have to ride the defense. And overall, it was a good win against the Chargers team that came out with something to prove. New coach, Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, the Chargers have some injuries, and you have to come out with a better game. I think the Chiefs played probably like a C- game yesterday. You probably have to play a B+ game next time you see them, assuming they're at least a little bit healthier. But all in all, you're 4-0, and you're not even playing anywhere near your best football yet. Now, Michael, we need to talk about the injuries because that's a big thing. Rashee Rice, right? If he goes down for the season, it basically changes the entire trajectory. That is more important than the result of the Chargers game. And it definitely felt like after he got hurt too, there was some life that got sucked out of this team. You could just kind of feel the momentum change just a little bit for them. And it wasn't great. But multiple outlets at this point, Adam Schefter included, has said that Rashee Rice will have to undergo further testing later this. We will not find out until next week what his official diagnosis is. He's gotten apparently multiple tests by multiple different doctors, or they've ran some different tests. That there's rumors going around to this that they've ran multiple different tests. They can't determine if the ACL is intact or not. It could be as bad as we thought. It could potentially be better than we thought, though. Either way, Rashee Rice is probably slated to miss an extended amount of time, if not the entire season. And I think the general consensus among a lot of us, Michael, is that this team probably should grab a wide receiver, because not only are you down Rashee Rice, you're down Hollywood Brown for the rest of this year. I like Juju, but he's a corpse of what he once was. Xavier Worthy's a rookie. You're simply going to have to grab somebody. I know you talked about some names on your channel. I talked about some on mine, but what is your reasoning for wanting to grab a wide receiver, and who are some names you have in mind? And then any additional thoughts on the Rashee Rice injury as well, and maybe what the heck's going on here.
I want to talk about that first. The fact that we don't know what is going on a day after a pretty, I don't want to say easy injury to predict, but you know it's serious, and you think an MRI would give you a proper indication of what is going on. And so the fact that we hear, oh, it's a torn ACL, he's out for the year, and then we hear, but wait, it might not be as serious as initially reported. So it's like, I don't know what to believe. And listen, if it comes back that he does have a torn ACL, maybe we do have a serious conversation about how bad this Chiefs medical staff is, that they reported on a couple months ago, because how long does it take you to diagnose somebody with a torn ACL? Like, if Hollywood Brown had that surgery months ago, he could have been back maybe earlier on towards the end of the season. So maybe there is some truth to the medical staff, not being as good as we initially thought. But yeah, I think the Chiefs need to go out and trade for a wide receiver. I think that it's pretty imperative.
Real quick, let me just stop you there. I feel like, this is my theory on maybe what's going on. So I feel as if maybe the swelling is so bad in his knee that they need to wait for it to go down to get a clearer picture from the MRI. That could be what's going on. But even then, I've never heard of it taking a week for them to come to the determination of what it actually is.
Also, if it's as bad of a torn ACL as we think that it is, just like, you would be able to get some notion of that pretty quickly on. Like, I understand there's swelling, but swelling would go down within the next day, within the next 24 to 48 hours, especially like, it's not like they're just letting him sit there. They're icing it. They're making sure that they can get him as comfortable as possible. So the fact that we have no idea what's going on and reports are starting to change. Listen, I think that, the old saying is that no news is good news. I'm still expecting him to be out, most of the season, if not the entire season. But the fact that maybe we haven't heard anything, I feel like that is a positive, not a negative.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I feel like no news is good news right now, because if it was just clear cut, hey, torn ACL, I feel like we would have known by now. Maybe it's not as bad as we thought. That's just my optimistic side talking.
That would be a blessing in disguise. Even if he's gone for 3 months, like, you could work around that and hopefully get him back.
If he's gone for 3 months, I also think it still forces you to trade for a wide receiver, because that, combined with the uncertainty of Hollywood Brown when he might be back, and then the rust of Rashee Rice if he is back, I still think it forces you to trade for a wide receiver. And then if all those guys are to get healthy by the end of the season, you're looking pretty damn good. And that's if you trade for someone. So I feel like that's a good transition, Michael, into who are some guys that we might be interested in.
I think the biggest name that I was looking at, and the one that makes the most sense, is Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper's cap hit, it's only $605,000. The Browns converted his signing bonus into him taking less money, so he's a more desired trade target. I don't think the Browns are going to be any good this year. They've only won one game. And so maybe a trade for Amari Cooper is in the cards for the Chiefs. I think it makes a lot of sense. And another guy that I talked about earlier today is DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins, the Titans aren't a very good team. We have that history with, talking to Hopkins back when he was a free agent. He almost signed here. And so maybe that makes sense. The only hookup that I have is that might be pretty expensive. But if the Chiefs are really just trying to say, hey, we're trying to win a Super Bowl this season, it might be worth the price. It might be.
I heard Peter Schrager talking on Colin Cowherd's show on FS1 earlier today, and he said it perfectly. He was like, who cares about, another backup left tackle? Trade the damn draft pick, get a wide receiver, go for the three-peat. And that's exactly how I feel, because especially with Veach's kind of sketchy draft history in the early rounds as of recently, I'd be comfortable trading a draft pick for a proven wide receiver that can help you three-peat this year. And DeAndre Hopkins is one you mentioned. Like, he'd be pricey, but if you dangle, let's just say, a fourth or maybe that Snead third-round pick that they gave you for L'Jarius Snead earlier on and say, hey, we'll give you this asset, you give us D-Hop, but you pay most of his salary. I think you could pull that off because the Titans aren't probably going anywhere this year. Also, Tyler Boyd, who is someone we talked about, maybe adding for wide receiver depth in free agency, is on the Tennessee Titans, only on a one-year deal. Again, they probably aren't going anywhere this year. Maybe you could save Tyler Boyd from that situation, because the argument against signing him originally was that he crosses over too much with Rashee Rice. Well, Rashee Rice is injured now, which would make him a perfect candidate to fill in. I also really like Deontay Johnson of the Carolina Panthers, because I think he's the closest thing to Rashee Rice that you could get on the trade market, and I actually think he'd be available. And the Panthers would be the most likely to deal with you because they're in the NFC. That would be one I'm looking into. And there's predated interest because the Chiefs tried to trade for him in the offseason. The Pittsburgh Steelers said, no, we're not trading with you because we don't want to help you. Carolina Panthers seem more likely to deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Amari Cooper is probably the second call I'd make, if not Deontay Johnson, because like you said, he'd be affordable. They converted most of his salary this year into a signing bonus, which means he's super cheap. He'd also give you a true alpha wide receiver on the outside, and then you can just let Xavier Worthy play in the slot for the rest of the year. And then maybe you cross your fingers, you can get Hollywood Brown back, and then I think you could definitely work with that. So there's some names out there that are available. We'll see if the Kansas City Chiefs actually make a move, but I would love to see them do it because I think there's a lot of likely candidates out there that they could easily get. And I also just think that they should have been inquiring about wide receivers even before the Rashee Rice injury.
Oh, yeah. And listen, I saw this the other day. Brett Veach has traded for a wide receiver the past two trade deadlines. He got Kadarius Toney and then Mecole Hardman last year. And so I think that there's clearly an urgent need at wide receiver. Josh, it might not only be a one wide receiver, issue. It might be a two. Like, they might have to go out and trade for two wide receivers to fix the current need on offense, especially with all the injuries that we've already seen. Get that insurance. Like, at this point, trade a 4th-round pick, trade a 5th-round pick. If you've got to, trade a 3rd-round pick. Like, I would rather trade those assets away and win this Super Bowl than draft somebody in the 3rd round that ends up being Lucas Niang. I just think that they could take the proven commodity at wide receiver, and they could do that very easily by trading with a team that's not very good. I mean, Adam Thielen could also be somebody that they poach.
Yes. Yeah, now the problem is he's on IR right now, and he's supposed to be on IR until at least week 7 because of the time in which he was put on IR. The trade deadline's week 8. I can't remember what the rules are for trading for a player that's on IR, so I think he'd have to come off IR potentially if you want to trade for him. But if he's healthy and available, yes, I'd look into him as well. I mean, I wouldn't also be opposed, Michael, to them trading for multiple wide receivers, depending on who it is, or even combining a trade for a wide receiver with a free agent signing someone like Michael Thomas.
I haven't heard Michael Thomas's name in forever. They could definitely get a couple wide receivers, because I think that might be what it takes. I mean, this offense is starved of wide receiver talent. And so, I think that 2 wide receivers would be best case scenario. If they don't get one at the deadline, we're going to have a conversation, because that is unforgivable. You could get a wide receiver for damn near nothing.
Yeah, I was actually going to say this. I was thinking of this earlier whenever you and I agreed to do a video later today. Something that I was going to say, it just popped back in my head. If we get into the postseason and we lose just because of something, anything else other than wide receiver, fans will be like, okay, whatever. It just wasn't your year. The repeating is hard. If we get to the postseason, no moves are made for a wide receiver, and we lose directly because of either the passing game or wide receiver play, every single Chiefs fan is going to be pissed, demanding answers from Brett Veach.
Yeah, no, that's the situation that we're in right now. And I think that the blessing of this situation is that it happened early. It happened before the trade deadline. You can still fix this, Brett Veach, but do they have the necessary draft capital to acquire some of the people that we're talking about? I think they do, but are they willing to move off of that capital? And that's where we get into an interesting conversation, because the Chiefs are stubborn. You know this. I know this. Yeah. They do not like to move off of their guys to the detriment of this team. And so I think that if I was the GM of this team, I'm trading for 2 wide receivers. I still think they probably make a move for one, but I can't confidently sit up here and say, yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I had to agree. Well, it's funny because Andy Reid also had another quote from his press conference earlier today when someone asked him about potentially trading for a wide receiver. He's like, depends on who it is. If they're familiar with the offense, I'm thinking, so shoot, our only options are like Kadarius Toney off the Browns practice squad and Demarcus Robinson.
Call that's MBS.
Yeah. Getting MBS back from the Bills. That's probably what we're looking at. Everyone's dreaming big, and they're probably going to go back, crawling back to some old player, right? That's what they do.
Dude, if they traded for Demarcus Robinson, I'd crash out. I would crash out. I could not. We're gonna leave that thought at the door. Let's just say that.
I think there's a good place to end it as well. So, I mean, I think everyone gets where we're coming from. They know that we think they should get a wide receiver. That's regardless of really what the prognosis is for Rashee Rice. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. There's our Chargers game recap. We talked about the wide receiver situation, everything going on with Rashee Rice, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Before we officially sign off, Michael, where can the people find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at KC Sports Report. We're like 25, 35 subscribers away from 7,000. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. Subscribe to Josh's channel if you haven't already, because we are going to be providing you guys Chiefs content every week all season long, so you do not want to miss that. So subscribe to his channel, hit the bell notification if you haven't already, and like this video. It helps us both out.
There you guys have it, and that'll all be in the description. As always, go and check out Michael's channel. Real close to 7,000 subscribers. We want to see him hit that. All that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. You can check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com for more. We'll see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs.